What if I told you that every time you say, "This is the last time," your brain quietly prepares for the next time? Read that again. The moment you declare war on a craving, when you tense up, suppress it, fight it, shame yourself for even having it, you trigger the exact biological cascade that makes the urge come back stronger. This is why the cycle feels so brutal. You resist, you hold it in, you distract yourself. Maybe you even win for a few days. And then one night, when you're tired or stressed, the urge doesn't just whisper, it roars. And afterward comes the guilt, the self-blame, the promise to be stronger next time. But this is not a willpower failure. It's a wiring issue. Most advice out there treats addiction like a bad habit you need to crush. But the brain doesn't respond well to being crushed. It responds to chemistry, stress signals, and survival circuits that are far more primitive than motivation. In this video, I'm going to show you what's actually happening inside your brain during a craving, why suppression chemically amplifies desire, and a simple method that can lower an urge in about 60 seconds. Once you understand this mechanism, the fight changes completely. Here's the biggest myth about addiction. The substance or behavior is the problem. It's not. Alcohol is not the root problem. Porn is not the root problem. Sugar is not the root problem. Even social media isn't the root problem. These are triggers, not causes. Yet most conventional advice focuses entirely on removing the trigger. Delete the app, throw the alcohol away, block the website. And while reducing exposure can help temporarily, it does absolutely nothing to fix the underlying mechanism that keeps recreating the craving. That's why so many people relapse, sometimes even harder after periods of strict control. Mainstream approaches often treat addiction like a bad habit loop driven purely by dopamine. The narrative is simple. You overstimulated your reward system, so now you crave more dopamine. Therefore, you must detox from dopamine. But that explanation is incomplete. Dopamine is only part of the story. In fact, dopamine alone doesn't explain why stress makes cravings explode. It doesn't explain why urges intensify when you suppress them. And it doesn't explain why people relapse most often when they're tired, anxious, lonely, or overwhelmed. The real root cause sits deeper in the interaction between dopamine, glutamate, and stress hormones like cortisol. Let me explain. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It doesn't create pleasure as much as it creates pursuit. It makes you want. But dopamine becomes dangerous when it's paired with glutamate, the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. Glutamate is what strengthens neural pathways. It wires habits into circuits. When you repeatedly engage in a behavior under stress, your brain links relief with that behavior. Not pleasure, relief. And here's where most people miss the mark. Stress is the amplifier. Every time you resist a craving aggressively, you increase internal stress. Your body releases cortisol. Cortisol signals threat. And when the brain senses threat, it searches for the fastest way to restore safety. If in the past a certain behavior reduced stress, even temporarily, your brain tags it as a survival solution. Now the craving isn't about pleasure, it's about regulation. This is why suppression backfires. When you fight the urge, you're adding stress to a stress-driven loop. Cortisol rises. Glutamate strengthens the craving pathway. Dopamine spikes in anticipation of relief. You're literally reinforcing the circuit you're trying to break. So the root issue isn't weak willpower. It's a dysregulated stress-reward circuit that has learned one very specific solution to discomfort. Until you address that biological loop, stress chemistry, neural reinforcement, and emotional regulation, removing the behavior alone will feel like holding your breath underwater. Eventually, the body wins. Now let's slow this down and make it very clear, because once you understand the mechanism, the shame starts to disappear. Imagine your brain as a prediction machine. Its number one job is survival. Not happiness, not discipline, survival. Whenever you feel stressed, whether it's emotional stress, lack of sleep, loneliness, boredom, or even blood sugar crashes, your brain interprets that as a mild threat. The hypothalamus signals your adrenal glands, cortisol rises, and your nervous system shifts into alert mode. Cortisol is not evil, it's protective, but it makes your brain prioritize fast relief. Now, here's where dopamine comes in. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It's the motivation and anticipation chemical. It spikes not when you experience reward, but when you expect it. That spike creates focus, drive, craving. But dopamine alone doesn't build addiction. Glutamate does. Glutamate is the brain's main excitatory neurotransmitter. Think of it as the wiring signal. When dopamine says, "This is important," glutamate says, "Let's strengthen this pathway." So here's what happens during repeated stress relief behavior. You feel discomfort or stress. You engage in a behavior that reduces that discomfort quickly. Dopamine spikes in anticipation next time. Glutamate strengthens the neural circuit linking stress, behavior, relief. Over time, that pathway becomes automatic. Now, here's the critical piece most people don't realize. The brain doesn't remember pleasure as strongly as it remembers relief from pain. If a behavior consistently lowers cortisol, even temporarily, your survival brain flags it as essential. That's why cravings intensify when you're exhausted or overwhelmed. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making part of your brain, becomes less active under stress. Meanwhile, your limbic system, your emotional survival circuitry, becomes more dominant. It's not that you lose control. Control is biologically reduced. And when you try to suppress the urge aggressively, something interesting happens. Suppression activates the anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in conflict monitoring. That internal struggle itself is perceived as stress. More cortisol, more neural tension. So now you have stress from life, stress from resisting, a brain that already wired one fast solution. The dopamine spike becomes stronger because anticipation of relief increases under stress. Glutamate fires, reinforcing the pathway further. The urge feels louder, more urgent, almost physical. This is why people describe cravings as waves or surges. It's not weakness, it's synchronized neurochemistry. But here's the empowering part. Cravings are state dependent. They are biochemical spikes, not permanent truths. A typical urge peaks and falls within minutes, if not reinforced. The reason it feels unbearable is because we interpret it as a command instead of a temporary stress signal. When you understand that an urge is simply dopamine anticipating stress relief, plus glutamate activating a learned pathway under cortisol influence, something shifts. You stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing a loop. And loops can be rewired. Now we shift from theory to execution. If the root problem is a dysregulated stress-reward circuit, then the solution is not brute force resistance. The solution is lowering stress chemistry and weakening the glutamate-driven pathway while strengthening healthier circuits. Here's exactly how you start. Number 1, stop fighting the urge, regulate it. When a craving hits, do not suppress it aggressively. Instead, pause and label it. This is a stress spike. Then slow your breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 6 to 8 seconds for about 1 minute. Longer exhales activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That lowers cortisol. When cortisol drops, dopamine anticipation weakens. Most urges peak and decline within 60 to 90 seconds if you don't fuel them with resistance or action. You're not obeying the urge. You're letting the chemical wave pass. Number 2, reduce baseline stress daily. Remember, cravings amplify when cortisol is chronically elevated. So your daily habits matter more than your emergency willpower. Prioritize 7 to 9 hours of consistent sleep, morning sunlight exposure, moderate strength training or brisk walking, stable blood sugar, protein with meals, avoid extreme sugar spikes. These lower overall stress load, which reduces how intense cravings feel. Number 3, rewire the relief association. Your brain learned that a specific behavior equals relief. You must teach it alternative relief. Immediately after stress, replace the old behavior with cold water on your face, a 5-minute fast walk, a quick set of push-ups, calling or texting someone supportive. These create mild dopamine shifts and reduce cortisol without reinforcing the old loop. Consistency matters more than intensity. Glutamate rewires through repetition. Number 4, support your neurochemistry. Certain nutrients can help stabilize the system. Magnesium glycinate in the evening can calm excitatory signaling. NAC, N-acetylcysteine, has evidence supporting reduction of compulsive urges by modulating glutamate balance. Adequate protein intake supports dopamine regulation. Omega-3 fatty acids support prefrontal function. This is not magic, it's biochemical support. Number 5, change the environment, not just the intention. Willpower is unreliable under stress. Environment design is powerful. If something is within arm's reach, your brain will default to it under cortisol. Increase friction, add barriers, move triggers out of immediate access. Make the healthy option easier than the addictive one. And finally, remember that urges are temporary states, not identities. When you stop interpreting them as commands and start seeing them as chemical waves, you regain leverage. This is not about becoming stronger. It's about becoming smarter with your biology. Now, if this made sense to you, there's something even deeper we need to talk about. Because addiction doesn't just hijack your dopamine system, it also quietly damages your prefrontal cortex, the very part of your brain responsible for discipline, focus, and decision-making. And most people trying to quit are unknowingly working with a weakened control system. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to rebuild that control center and accelerate recovery at the neurological level. Click on that video now because this is where real rewiring begins.